Checkout tracking by the NPD Group brings you a receipt collecting system that gathers data anonymously through technology we created, providing your businesses with answers.
So, as somebody who's been doing this for a few years, I am constantly amazed at the ability of analytics to illuminate, confuse, but most importantly, save jobs by actually allowing everyone involved to make intelligent decisions and explain those decisions to their bosses. So for analytics, I am grateful, and I am always a little terrified trying to imagine creating a social game without analytics. Sure. But let's kind of dive in a little bit and flick the slide, and we'll kind of take a look at a few things here. Why don't you go through the agenda?
Yeah, definitely. So, we only have 20 minutes, but the quick agenda here is can versus can't in terms of what analytics platform can and cannot do, or what you can get out of analytics. The whole build versus buy scenario, which is age-old and always comes up in terms of whether you should build your own analytics frameworks or whether you should buy a third-party platform. And then, of course, some key metrics and indicators for success in terms of what type of metrics you'd like to look at to make sure that your game is successful. And then, of course, we'll open it up to Q&A afterwards. So.
Sure. And just in terms of the audience, do you guys have live social casino games? How many publishers are in the audience? Publishers? Game designers? The game designers? Okay. And the focus of this are definitely social casino metrics. So we can ask questions about anything else at the end. In terms of what analytics can't do, they definitely can't make your game more fun. But much to the chagrin of game designers, they also will not make your game less fun. So it's important to understand that. And analytics can't increase your retention, your virality, or your monetization in and of themselves, but they can do a lot of things. So Don, why don't you dive in a little bit?
Yeah, so definitely, obviously, analytics can do a lot, but a couple quick points that we'll obviously go into is what analytics can do is quickly highlight potential problem areas, right? So let's say you're releasing a new version of your game, of your app into the store, really being able to look at engagement rates and make sure that there's no issues and that people are still engaged with your app. Things like identifying when your game is ready for prime time much earlier. So, you obviously want to have marketing efforts and have UA campaigns and really setting up your game to make sure that you're getting ROI and that the LTV makes sense and it makes sense for you to buy on those marketing campaigns. And other things in terms of helping designers focus on the player. You guys, obviously game designers, they'll come up with bright ideas in terms of what types of mechanics or what types of features they want to see in the app. But really making sure that whatever feature it is makes sense for the players. So really honing in on your demographic and making sure your designers know what the demographic is that you're trying to cater to. And then along with that, helping studios compete by prioritizing those features in terms of being able to iterate on those features and make the game better.
So in terms of the build versus buy equations, I don't. that's an interesting slide.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's obviously broken.
Where is the rest of that slide?
It's gone missing.
So I have yet to meet a head of BI who didn't absolutely insist that the only way to go was to build a data warehouse from scratch and kind of pick their own data visualization software and insist that this entire effort was not going to take more than 1 or 2 months and would not actually cost me a lot of money. And I actually have yet to see that work. So, in terms of why that doesn't work, Don, why don't you kind of go into a little bit of the detail?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, basically, the time factor is huge, right? In terms of how long it takes for you to build your own platform or your own analytics framework versus buying a third-party platform. So, I mean, at Upsight, I mean, we've been around for, we're a result of a merger between Contagion and Playhaven, but essentially we've been around for ever since the social days, 6, 7, 8 years. So, really being able to take those learnings and make a platform that is accurate and that saves you time is key. Obviously, operational costs and staffing, you have a lot of people involved with building such a framework in terms of having your sysadmin people that you have to hire, along with analysts, along with engineers, and you're essentially taking engineers in most cases away from what them actually building a game in order to get analytics up and running for you. So really all those costs around staffing, and then also, of course, having your own data warehouse and having your own visualization layers and your own servers. So that obviously entails a lot of costs. We would have shown them to you, but obviously the slide's not fully there. And then, of course, accuracy of data, being able to get access to all your raw data and capture all the data points that you actually want to see. And ultimately, just being able to focus on your business. A lot of guys like to build their own analytics frameworks or their own ad type frameworks. So really being able to focus on actually just building a quality game is, I think, what it's all about. And that always gets kind of lost in the shuffle. Yeah.
Okay. You want to hit the next?
Oh, there we go.
See that?
Okay.
It's a much more sophisticated PowerPoint than you imagined.
Much more sophisticated. So, as I was talking about the hard costs, again, the bandwidth, servers, the data warehouse, the visualization software like Tableau or Click that you would need. Engineers, I mean, you need part-time engineers to kind of get things up and running. And of course, you might need extra analysts to keep this that kind of framework in place. But really, the time to build and the time lost from focusing on the business is really key. So really thinking about what the overall opportunity cost for you is when it comes to building versus buying.
And just in terms of timing, I think a much more accurate estimate, if you really wanted to build it yourself, would be somewhere 6 to 12 months.
Yeah. So.
Want to hit the next slide? Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about some of the key metrics and some basic ones to start with, and we're going to look at them through the lens of your game lifecycle. And so, really what you're looking at and how the metrics move is really dependent on, whether your game is brand new and you're just launching, or is somewhat in its adolescence, or has been around and your team is really hitting on all cylinders, and your game is a mature game. So why don't we look at these through those lenses?
Yeah, definitely. So we could, obviously there's a lot here, so we'll just focus on a couple. But you'll see basic things like load times and errors in your game when you're first launching. That's pivotal in terms of making sure that your game loads properly and quickly. Intro funnels in terms of getting them registered and introducing the user to the game is definitely key. Along with day one retention, I think a good baseline is anywhere from 35 to 50%. And that's a huge, obviously retention is seeing retention in a cohorted view over the long tail over 90, 180, 360 days is important, but I think day one retention is always important in my mind. And then, of course, other things that matter with launch are first-time user experience, making sure that they have a great experience when they first launch the app. Once they go through kind of the introduction of the app, making sure that the tutorial that they're in, that they're getting through it quickly and efficiently, and the conversion rates for that funnel in each step are high. And then in terms of some other metrics, conversion rates of paying users, I mean, this is obviously important in launch, but I mean, this is something you'll always want to iterate on in adolescence and maturity, and you'll see higher conversion rates in terms of percentage of paying users for your app over time. So maybe a good benchmark might be anywhere from 1.5 to 3.5% of your users are paying users. Do we take? So I guess we'll save questions for then. But yeah, conversion rates, ARPDAU that's a wide range right there, 0.5 cents to 50 cents. But obviously, you know, with casino games, you're going to see a lot higher ARPDAU rates these days. I think the category in and of itself has got much more sophisticated. And then in terms of, you know, lifetime value and ROI, those are things that you want to get at launch, but of course are important to track as the game progresses in its life cycle. Acquisition costs and you know, there's the CPI versus effective CPI, and really making sure that there's a positive ROI for your game. And I know that you, I don't know, Dave, you're probably a master at this in terms of making sure that you're getting cost effectiveness out of any marketing or UA campaigns that you're running.
Well, basically, we just try and beat up on our vendors as much as possible. So yes, but the reality, I think, today in our industry is that, you know, straight CPIs are, you know, anywhere from $4 to $10, which means especially at the beginning, you know, you really have to focus on virality, getting organic players, and get your eCPI hopefully down to, you know, something more like, you know, $2 to $4 to have, you know, a shot at a positive ROI.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, at the bottom you'll see cohorts and user segments. Really, I think, obviously there's basic metrics, but really being able to break everything down by cohorts. The typical ones are paying, non-paying users, attribution source, really seeing the downstream of metrics and analytics from all the users that you acquire through all these third-party ad networks, and seeing what their retention, engagement, monetization metrics look like are super key, along with user profiles. I know some apps have a wide range of user profiles. Minnow Dolphin Whale is kind of the basic one, but some people have 7 or 8 different categorizations of how they view certain users and how they value those users. But again, I think you know, you can track, you know, very basic baseline metrics, but really being able to look at them by segments actually makes a basic metric a lot more interesting when you're pitting the two against each other. So
yeah, let's take a look at some more interesting or advanced metrics here.
Yeah, so, you know, there are obviously a lot of different metrics you can track. It really depends on the type of app that you have and what you consider important for you guys. A typical one for maybe a social casino game is return to player, or you know, win value over bet value in terms of what's the ratio and percentage of a user that is winning. And I think that's really important and key to balance your economy and make sure that you have a winning monetizing game. Other things that are super key are things in terms of first purchases, when is their first purchase, where they're located in the actual game, and what's the time until they make that first purchase. And additionally, the percentage of purchases on day 0, I think is super key. You know, it could be anywhere from 10 to 30% of your revenue for a particular user, but obviously there's a long tail, and things start to even out in terms of people will continually spend, but to a lesser degree than when they first launched the game. And then in currency balance across all levels and tracking currency spend versus currency earned, super important again for economy. Another thing, actually, going over to the right, bets or spins after first session, I think that's a key indicator for a launching game. So in that life cycle, it's really important to see on that first session how many bets or how many spins an average user does, and then obviously iterating on that. And again, it's progression funnels. It's interesting to break down progression funnels, paying versus non-paying users, but again, you could do it by all sorts of different cohorts, but really seeing how people are getting through the app, if it's a slots game, getting to certain different slots machines and progressing that way, or getting them to try different features, whether you have tournaments or what have you. And the time for them to reach that is definitely something that I would recommend tracking. Some other unique ones is average revenue per spin or bet. It typically be anywhere from 1 cent to 3 cents, but it's important to track that revenue per spin per bet. I mean, you could track app revenue by level or by slot machine or by table or whatever it is, but in general, it's a good indicator as the game goes on or even tracking that metric on a daily basis to see how often, how well your game is doing in terms of, from a revenue perspective. And then, bets or spins per unique user, per session or day, being able to just see how frequently they're betting or spinning. And of course, again, the two important key things here are, again, cohorts, breaking it down, all these, and making those comparisons. And then also A/B testing is, I know every casino game these days does A/B testing, but really validating hypotheses. And we all have hypotheses about our game in terms of what works, what doesn't, what the users might like, but being able to track that and taking those cohorts and user segments and moving them in the right direction in terms of increasing engagement or engagement rates or conversion rates. So,
why don't we? I think we're getting close. Why don't we open it up to some questions from the audience? What else do we have on?
Yeah. I just did a recap.
we can skip the recap and just open it up to questions.
Yes.
There was a measure you mentioned called FTUE.
Yes.
I don't remember what the acronym means, but my question, first time user
experience?
Right, how do you actually measure that? What do you mean by user experience?
So that's actually, I should have wrote funnel. So that's, I mean, you could break it down into a lot of different components or stages within the beginning of your app, but basically saying from app launch, do they go through the registration process, and then where do they go in the app? I mean, if it's a casino app, which areas do they go through, and just what their first time user experience is like. It's usually tied to a tutorial too, obviously.
Exactly. It's the general term for every step of your tutorial.
Yeah, so optimizing on that tutorial. Yeah. Yes.
Question about how you guys recommend developers resolve discrepancies in data between one platform and another. We might have user attribution telling us one thing and metrics platform telling us another, and our own internal data telling us something else. What's a good way to kind of resolve all that discrepancy?
Yeah, that's a good question. It comes up all the time, and honestly,
how about that?
The truthful answer, it's tough. I mean, you got so many different. You have your own internal framework, and you have a bunch of different third parties who measure metrics in different ways, right? And how they classify a metric is completely different from one to another. So you're always going to see discrepancies. So as much as you can, being able to see, ask, and know maybe if they will tell you in terms of what are the underlying differences for how they calculate metrics, and being able to see what the discrepancies are there. But I don't think you're going to see that no matter what. And I think that's something a lot of people get hung up on. And obviously, accuracy of data is super important. And that's actually exactly why you should have maybe a couple platforms, free or paid, to be able to track all that. But I don't think there's any easy answer for that. Sorry, hope that helped.
Just a small thing. The day one retention you mentioned, 35 to 50%. Is it for social casino genre or entire gaming?
I would say social casino, but it's day one retention, so that is for social casino. But in general, day one retention could even change. It depends on the game, right? If your game is super popular in Asia, for example, right, and you're focused on Asia, and it picks steam there, you're going to see huge retention rates there because it's so localized to that region. So if you break out day one as not an average, but across a bunch of different countries, that will blend and it'll be much lower. So it depends on where your game is launching, who your audience is, and again, what type of game you have. Obviously, mid-core, hardcore games will have different types of retention rates depending, but that is for social.
And this is for mobile gaming or even canvas and mobile?
I think it could be both. I mean, I don't think there are huge differentiators between social and mobile, but I tend to focus on mobile just because social is kind of a dying breed. So for me, it's mostly mobile. Yeah.
What do you recommend measuring for gauging the success of re-engagement?
Measuring the success, like a re-engagement type campaign through a third-party like ad agency or like, I mean, that's tougher to track. I mean, I'm assuming you're trying to re-engage users who might have used to be whales, right? And they've dropped off the game, they've churned, and you're trying to re-engage them via running another ad campaign and getting them in different spots. So I mean, it's really just looking at them coming back into the app and seeing what their retention rates are, what their engagement rates are, and actually how they monetize within those first couple of days once they come back into the app. I think that's super key to see if those match up with how they used to spend, what was their spending behavior in the past, and aligning that and see if that's there, and of course, bringing them and keeping them in with new features. I mean, obviously, if you're going to run a campaign against that, you're going to see your creative is going to match that in terms of, hey, we have a new feature. You haven't been in our game for a while. Why don't you try out this new feature? It's going to blow your socks off, and get them in that way, and then keep them in that way to start playing the game again.
What's the average lifetime of the casual casino game you see?
It's much better than what a non-social casino game would be. I mean, like
compared with other casual games. Casual casino game, what's the average?
Yeah,
lifetime?
I mean that's tough to say. I mean, what I can tell you is like retention rates, like for like a solitaire, for example, right? I mean, this is old data, but retention, you could have 90-day retention rates that are super strong, right? But now it's even much better than that. So obviously retention correlates with LTV. So just making sure that you have a really good long tail retention, high retention rate, will ensure that you have decent LTV. So I don't have a specific range.
It can be 6 months or longer.
Yeah, it's going to be longer for social casino games.
What are the standard D7 by D1 and D30 by D7 metrics?
D7?
D7 by day 1, if you, how many day 1 users typically come on day 7?
I don't know from day 1 to day 7, but day 7, I mean, a high one is 25%, I would say, 20 to 25%.
So off of D1?
Off of day 0, though, not off day 1.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.